Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm doing my top 4 books that I find myself constantly going back to or being drawn back to. This is sort of the end of the series of videos that started with the viewer question of if there were any books in my collection that I just had no interest in revisiting. And so this is sort of the exact opposite of that, and I had a couple videos in between with books that I, was really excited about and never got a chance to read through, as well as books that either failed to, reach my expectations because, I was either expecting too much or too little from the books. So this is the ending of that sort of little sub-series of videos. So, like I said, today it's all about books that I find myself constantly going back to. And when I say constantly, I don't mean like every day. I just keep getting drawn back to these books. But these are just books that if I'm bored or just looking for something to fill the time to read, these are books that I will usually go for over a lot of the others in my collection. One of the tough things with this video or with this series in general is I did not want to duplicate any of my answers or any of my selections throughout the entirety. So for example, with the books that I found disappointing, those could have easily appeared on the section of books that I'm not really interested in going back to. The books that I was pleasantly surprised with are books that, I do find myself kind of going back to on a regular basis. But I didn't want to do like the overlap and have the same book appear in 2 separate videos in the series because I honestly have enough books that I should be able to do separate choices for them all. But things like the 4th edition core rulebooks, for example, are ones that I do find myself picking up every once in a while. But I already talked about them, so we are going to move on. So with this video, and I'm keeping it to 4 because that was what the number of books was in my initial video, and I wanted to keep it that way for consistency's sake. I mean, yes, the last video had 8 books in it, but they were 4 for one subject and 4 for another, so it still works, at least I want to convince myself of that. So starting with, and these are in no particular order, and I guess just to finish qualifying these, like I said, these are books that I'm not picking up every single day or other day or even necessarily every single week, but at least a few times a year I will find myself just picking these up and flipping through it just for the sheer enjoyment. They're not connected to research for a video, they're not connected to a campaign that I'm running or an adventure that I was planning or an encounter I was looking to design. These were just things that I picked up to read through because I just enjoy reading through them. So we are going to start with the 3.5 Draconomicon. So this book was, in my opinion, the first really great 3.5 book that I had in my collection. 3rd edition of 3.5 had sort of a hit or miss record when it came to putting things out. But this one, I think, was just an absolute solid winner. There's a lot of great information about the ecology of the different major dragon types, your metallics, your chromatics, as well as information on describing the actual individual subspecies of dragons within. And the great thing about it was that it had the dragons statted out for each variety, for each age category. Now, today, that seems kind of, not a big deal, right? Because in modern D&D, you get 3 or 4 different age categories. But back in the day, there was a dozen of them. All the way from, so Ancient, which is the highest level that we have now, there were 2 or 3 other levels above that back in these days. So, and there were a lot of work to do. So to have everything set out for you was just, again, absolutely fantastic. So we have them here with the different stat blocks and everything. Also, I have to say that I absolutely loved the little baby dragon artwork that they did here. So that's the blue. There's one. I want to find the copper dragon. That's the one I really want to. Oh, it's not quite the same way that I remember, but there's the copper dragon. Anyway, I just love the little baby dragons that they had in here. But there was a lot of great stuff in this book. You had maps for layers. You had the different size comparisons, which was great to see, like from the wormling all the way up to the great worm dragon. And there was also things like dragon feats or meta, like breath weapon, magical like substitution things or breath weapon based spells that could affect how the breath weapon works. There was just a lot of great stuff in this book. But moreover, like I don't really go back to read the feats or the spells or stuff like that. I just like to go back and read the flavor, to go back and look at things like the physical anatomy of the dragon, like, you know, with its skeletal structure, its, you know, its muscular and organ layout. So just a lot of really great stuff in here. So this is an absolutely fantastic book, and one that I think is great to have in any collection. And I do believe, I might be wrong, but I do believe that this is one of the books available for print on demand through DM's Guild. So if you don't have it, that's the way I would recommend getting it, because I have seen some pretty decent prices on this book to try to buy it off of the sites like, you know, eBay or other, you know, sites like that. So, but this is an absolutely great book that I just, you know, every once in a while I just find myself picking this up off the shelf and reading through it. So excellent stuff there. All right, up next we have the Forgotten Realms campaign guide for 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Now this is, I guess you could consider it to be a controversial choice, but I actually really liked the way that they did the Forgotten Realms in 4th edition. They essentially made some pretty drastic changes to the world itself. They advanced the timeline by a century. Basically, they just distanced it from the plethora of novels out there. And as someone who didn't read a lot of the novels at the time that I got this, and someone who, you know, really loved the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, and I still do, but I really loved the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. The issue was that if I filled in certain blanks based off of how I wanted the story to go, but it contradicted something that was in a novel, the initial group I was playing with did have people in it that would correct me on what happened, using like the novels as sort of an example. So it made trying to run campaigns in that world difficult if you wanted to reference any of the major events. And the Forgotten Realms is just a setting that's really shaped by the stories, like the novels. Not to the degree that Dragonlance is, mind you, but it's getting there, or was getting there. So some pretty drastic changes here, but I liked it. I actually really liked the way that they handled things. I liked that they brought back the Netherese Empire, instead of it being just the desert with the one floating city of shade. They actually brought back, you know, the Nethril wizards and the region, and which is something that I was wanting to have for a long time. So I was just really happy with this one, and every once in a while I do find myself sort of going back and just flipping through it and reading through some of the aspects of it. So this is a book, again, that I really thoroughly enjoyed, and I kind of wish they hadn't like as drastically backpedaled with the Forgotten Realms setting as they did with 5th edition. I think that they should have tried to retain a little bit more of this, because this was a bold thing to do, to make such a change to this world, that, you know, I applaud them for, because it's stepping outside of their comfort zone, and I thought they did a good job with it. It's, of course, my opinion, but this is, you know, the whole video series is sort of based off of my opinion. So if you disagree, that's fine. Be civil about it, and let me know, again, what some of the books are that you find yourself going back to, because it's an enjoyable topic, I think, to discuss. So, but this is one for me that I find myself picking up every once in a while and going through. Up next is one that actually kind of surprised me, but for the last year or so, this is a book that I've been going back to pretty regularly, actually. And this is one that I probably pick up at least once a month. This or another variant of it. But that is the 2nd edition Player's Handbook for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. My history with 2nd edition is complicated, to say the least. I didn't have a lot of fond memories of it when I first started. And a lot of that was due to the atmosphere, the players not wanting to explain the rules, a DM that wasn't really ingratiating himself to new players, or wasn't someone who was willing to really help new people understand how to play the game. But I will say that those pretty negative experiences, I think, is what shaped me into the gamer that I am today. Because having been through that, I'm the kind of person that, just never wants someone else to feel that way. So I love introducing this game to new people, and I would rather someone ask the same question 100 times before they finally, figure it out or have it stick, than feel like they can't ask at all because they're just going to get attitude. So it's something that it did shape the way that I am now. But when I finally sort of just went back to look at this, in isolation from those past experiences, and just look at it for the way that the book is itself, I actually really like this. And I know second edition is another one of those versions. It seems like even numbered editions just are, bound to not be well regarded by the masses. But I actually just really found myself enjoying this. And having run first edition AD&D not that long ago, I will say 110% that I love the organization in this book and this edition with the Player's Handbook, DMG, and everything, way more than what was in the first edition one. The first edition was really, the DMG in particular was very scatterbrained, it felt like. And so I appreciate the cohesiveness and the ease of following that you can get with these books. But again, I just found myself going back and just reading through the classes and looking at things like the divine spheres of influence for clerics and druids and stuff like that, and priests, and the rogue class with the thief subclass, and how Bard was finally a class in of itself that you could just start at in first edition or second edition. So anyway, but I just found myself really, just going back to this every once in a while. And this is, of the books that I've done so far in this video, this is easily the one that I go to the most out of those three. However, it's not the book that I find myself going to the absolute most, because that one would have to be the D&D Rules Cyclopedia. Now, this is the copy that was sent to me by a subscriber, and it was someone who actually found it at a store for only $2, which is amazing because this was going online for hundreds of dollars, which is ridiculous. Now, truthfully, I usually look at my print-on-demand copy, but I've shown that in a recent video, so I thought, again, just for a little bit of variety, that I would go through and show the actual original one. But this is a book that I just constantly find myself going back to, and this is one that probably once every couple of weeks I am pulling off the shelf and just flipping through and reading a couple pages. This is the only edition of the game, with the exception of Zero Edition, that I've never actually run as a Dungeon Master yet. I did have little experience playing this, although it was the Moldvay variant of the basic rules. Not that they're significantly different between the two, but I just really just love this book. And I think, part of it was the fact that it was a holy grail item. It was one of those books that before the print-on-demand version came out, I just resigned myself to the fact that I was never going to own it. So once and getting it in after I finally ordered it was an ordeal in of itself. So it just, all that made me appreciate having it all that much more. So, and then to have someone offer to send me the original was absolutely incredible. Luckily, he only paid a couple bucks for it, so I don't have to feel bad about it. But this is just an awesome book. There's just a lot to love about this. I enjoy the simplicity of it, and I enjoy the simplicity, but I also enjoy the fact that it's not quite as softball, I guess you could say, as I'm finding with 5th edition. So I don't know. There's just stuff that I'm really starting to appreciate about the older editions. The more that I play some of the newer ones, and it's not to say that it's naturally superior to things like 5th edition, because honestly, there are times that things, advancements made in the rule systems are done for a reason. But there's just, I don't know, there's just something special about this book and about this version of the game that I just, again, can't help but find myself constantly going back to. I don't know if it's just like the art, or just the overall design of the classes. I don't know, but I just absolutely love this. And another reason that I like going back to this one just has to do with the fact that it also has like the setting information. So instead of it just being the player's handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide and a monster manual, it is also the like a campaign setting book. It has not a comprehensive set of information on the world itself, but there is enough of it here, and it gives you a very decent foundation to work with when you're designing campaigns or adventures and needing a world to put them in. So it does a really, really great job there. There's also some cool conversion information from converting this from this version to second edition AD&D, or vice versa. And I guess it's no coincidence that those two books, like the Rules Cyclopedia and the second edition AD&D rule books, are ones that I constantly find myself going back to. I don't know. It just enjoyable stuff. I will say that there's a lot of 5th edition books that I do find myself looking at on a regular basis as well. Like the Eberron campaign setting is a book that I will find myself going to every once in a while, as well as the Ghosts of Saltmarsh is one that I really enjoy. The Storm King's Thunder is another one that I really enjoy. But I just don't necessarily get a chance to talk about some of these books a lot, and that's why I went with these ones. So it's not, again, that I'm becoming anti-5th edition or anything, because that's certainly not the case, but I find that these are the ones that I go to more so than any of the others. So, but there's a lot of books I do find myself going back to, just because. So this is another one that I will leave the door open for a possible part 2. But for now, that's the end of this series. So let me know in the comments below, what are some of the books in your collection that you find yourself constantly going back to? Again, it doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be every week, doesn't even have to be every month, but a couple times a year, but just books that you find yourself being drawn back to whenever you're just looking for something to read through. And again, not for anything particularly connected to a current game that you're running or playing in, but just something that you pick up and read through because you just get the enjoyment out of it. I'd love to hear that from you guys in the comments below. I look forward to reading those. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care.